Hello! So I just wanted to share some of my favourite books I've read throughout 2022. When I started planning this video, I had the sort of title Top 10 Books from 2022, but when I was looking over, I've read just over 20 books this year, it's okay for me. I mean, I'm just slowly building up in the habit, trying to read a bit more, making more time for reading. But when I was looking through them all, I could only really pick 9 of the ones I really, really enjoyed that I either got value from, found entertaining, or changed me in some way, shape or form. So I just wanted to go through some of the top 10 books, or in this case 9, because there isn't actually a number 10. These were the ones I really enjoyed throughout 2022. Most of them I read this year, at least the ones I really enjoyed, were physical. I read a couple on my Kindle, and then one of them was an audio book. So just starting with the first one, it's actually probably the most embarrassing one, at least in my point of view, is Ian Fleming's Casino Royale. So the very first James Bond or 007 book. Quite a big James Bond fan, and I've loved the films throughout the years. Remember going to see one of the Pierce Brosnan ones in the films. I think it was Tomorrow Never Dies, the ice one, which isn't really that great, but I think after that I watched a few on TV. I mean, GoldenEye was the best Pierce Brosnan one, and when I think of Bond I always think of him. But then I went back and started watching all the old Sean Connery ones, Roger Moore ones. Absolutely love them. And then some of the Daniel Craig ones were a bit hit and miss for me, but I did really enjoy Casino Royale. The film itself was actually pretty good. So I sort of felt embarrassed that I'd actually never read any of his books. So it sort of made it my goal in 2022 to actually just sit down and start reading through all the Bond books. So I've got a few more on my Kindle, but Casino Royale was a brilliant book. Really, really enjoyed it. I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, I guess it's a bit of an older book now, but for those who haven't seen it, but the title sort of gives a lot of it away. It does take place mainly around a casino. It starts off a bit technical, I would say. A lot of like numerical stuff, finances, and it threw me around, but I really got into it after the first couple of chapters. Really good story. It shows him as more of a human being, I found, at least compared to the sort of James Bond I had in my head from the films. So this, great book. If like me, for whatever reason, if you're a Bond fan, you haven't started reading the books, definitely recommend it. The next one, bit of an unusual one, but I saw this on a YouTube video and it sounded really interesting. So I read this back in, I think, February or March. So it's Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. Amazing book, a bit of a twist in the story. So it's about David Starr. So I think, what's his name, a taxidermist, I believe is the term. So he sort of like took and studied different animal species. So it's sort of like inspired, I guess he was inspired by the likes of Charles Darwin. But it's just interesting to see how different people's viewpoints can be taken differently from different people. So how some people might see their work in one way, people then take it and change it. So I don't want to really spoil too much if you haven't really read it already, but it is a phenomenal book. It sort of twists and turns where, honestly, when the sort of character, the guy we're following, David Starr, when he sort of changes as you get further through the book, I didn't really see it coming. It's a bit of a shocking twist and turn. It's actually a bit, I mean, saying it's sort of depressing and a bit morally questionable is one way of putting it, but it's a fantastic book. Really, really loved it. Definitely recommend that one. Another one that I've been meaning to read for a while is the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Heard this being mentioned and recommended over YouTube, internet, friends, and I just thought it was the year to actually sit down and read it. What I really like about it is it's broken down each day and each month of the year. So it's broken down into months and then each day of the year. And it starts with like a quote from a Stoic, so it'll have quotes from the likes of Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, and then it'll sort of like be then Rand's take on it. So sometimes I'll maybe read a quote, I'll find it inspiring, or others I mightn't even fully understand, but then it's good to have his thoughts and reasonings behind it, and it's quite an easy one just to maybe read day by day. So when I read it first, I'm definitely planning on reading it again. I just read 1 page a day, so it breaks it down into the different days. A lot of the stuff sort of stuck with me around just changing how I guess I perceive the world and my sort of craft going forward and the things I want to focus on. And it's really opened up to me. I guess one of my main takeaways is just the subject around importance and what really matters to you, to us, and in my case to me. It's definitely one that I don't really feel like I fully got everything in from it, but it is one that I'm definitely going to be reading again. It was a fantastic book I read this year. Next one is Save the Cat, and this is by Blake Snyder. So this isn't really about, this is around screenwriting. So if you're interested in writing at all, definitely recommend it. There's a part of me that still wants to actually write a few screenplays in the next couple of decades. I think I'll personally, in my own time, I'm going to start with a few short stories. But there's so many great lessons in this, and one of my main takeaways, I think I've even taken aspects into my marketing career. So if you're involved in any way around writing, this is definitely one worth checking out. Not too long. It's got fantastic bits of advice, and the key areas for me were around when he talks about film log lines. So that would just be like, I guess when you're trying to sell a screenplay or a script, you'd have a film log line, which would be a couple sentences at most, that gives an overview of the story with the purpose, I guess, of selling it. And I've sort of taken that approach into both my own writing, articles I've been writing, and just trying to really get that story together and see if it's something that would be worth even writing about. Or it's almost like, I guess I see it as like being like an elevator pitch and taking lessons from other industries into your own, if you're writing in any way, is just fantastic. And this is another book I'm definitely going to be planning to read again, possibly this year. So Save the Cat is a brilliant book for any writers out there whatsoever. And I guess just to change the sort of the mood and approach, this was another one I finished not too long ago. So I think back in October I think I finished this. It is Perfectly Ordinary People. I think this one's by Nick Alexander, and really interesting. So again, it's loosely based on a true story. I don't really want to spoil too much, because if I go into too much detail, it sort of ruins the entire purpose of the book. But ultimately it's sort of set from a family's perspective, where they start to open up and find out more about their actual past and their family and where they come from, and it sort of just opens up, and it sort of takes place from these stories being told through almost like cassette interviews that someone's doing with one of the characters' parents. And then she was brought up during World War II, so it sort of goes back, you see her past, everything she had to deal with. It is a truly gripping story, to say the least. It is fantastic. It kept me engaged the whole way through. I don't want to spoil too much, but if you're... It's a hard one to summarize if it would be for you, but I would just say give it a go. Maybe read the back of the book, maybe some basic summaries. I don't want to say too much because it tends to spoil the whole plot of the story, but if you have any interest in sort of history, any mild interest in World War II, or even, for me, it's a story about people, to be honest, and really great one. So Perfectly Ordinary People is probably one of my favourite ones I've read this year. Definitely recommend it. And then up next is Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand. So this has probably been one of my favourite work-ish related ones. So if you're, I guess, in any sort of marketing role, or if you're a writer of any sort, this is like a phenomenal book in terms of just understanding the art of like storytelling and storycraft and how to build a good story. So he breaks it down into like a 7-piece framework. So like breaks down into the 7-piece framework. So it's your character, they then have a problem, they meet their guide, and then they give them then a plan. That plan then calls them into action, and then it either ends in success or it helps them to avoid failure, and it's sort of just that arc. And then he basically shows like it's like a more detailed version of how every story basically is structured. So your start, your middle, your end, but it's in a lot more detail. And when you start like viewing anything in the media, like TV shows or films in particular, you can see how they use that structure to create some of like the greatest movies of all time. And you can take lessons from this, really just overall to clarify your message in terms of marketing. So if you work in marketing, you work in a business, it's a phenomenal book, one that I'm continually going back on. There's some great sections on how to improve your website, and just really just like simplifying your content, having clear content, and there's so many great examples. This is a fantastic book and one I'm going to be going back on again. And then I guess the final of the physical ones, seen a few reviews here and there, but it's A Natural History of Dragons, and this one is by Marie Brennan. It's just a great book. If you're into that sort of style, what makes it unique to me is just how the story's told. So it's written as if it's like a memoir from this woman who's called Lady Trent back in the past, and it shows her story and how she's grown up and how she's become interested in all things in terms of drawing and understanding other species. And I guess you'd see her as more of like a academic historian, that type of person, but it's almost told, she's telling her story. It's just like a really interesting take on it. Really good book, had me hooked really the whole way through. If you're interested in that sort of like the stories around dragons and that mystic thing, but you want something a little bit different to the norm, this is really worth checking out. It's fantastic. Again, don't want to spoil too much. I think there's a series of 5 books, so I'm currently on the second one. Almost finished. Not as big of a fan as the second one. It gets a bit political, the second one. Still good, but the first one, Natural History of Dragons, is fantastic. I was planning, or still am planning, I actually drafted up a story myself around that sort of revolved around dragons, so I wanted to read as much stories that linked or involved dragons as I could to sort of just expose myself in different styles of writing. So there's personal things I've taken away from this, from the approach, but really great book. Then the next one, I have the physical book, but I think I've left it in my office, was The Dip by Seth Godin. So I've had it on my Kindle. I tend to reread it either every year or every other year. It's a very short book, so I believe it's under 100 pages. Great book if you're in marketing or business or anything like that. But I guess like a high level quick summary is it's about knowing when to quit. So it almost summarizes the dip of, say, for example, you were starting skiing. You'd start off, you'd be learning, you'd be growing, it'd still be really exciting, and there's that learning curve that goes up, and everything's so fast paced and new. But then you sort of hit this curve when the excitement sort of fades, it gets more challenging, and that's almost where it's at that arch, and then maybe just goes downhill before it goes up again. So it's, I guess in summary, it's just the key things I've taken from it each time are just knowing when to push through on something. So with things like, say, my writing and everything like that, it's trying to be realistic that it takes time to grow the skills, and as long as you enjoy it or push through it, it will take time, and these things can take like 3 or 4 years before you even see any growth or pushing through, so it can be a bit difficult. But also knowing if something's not right for you, whether if you actually don't enjoy it, so maybe you decide to start doing YouTube videos and you didn't actually enjoy shooting videos or editing them, or it's just something you didn't enjoy, there comes, or maybe you just don't get any value from it and there's other avenues. It's just sort of knowing when to quit. So it's a fantastic book, very short. I tend to reread it each year and I always get something slightly different out of it, but it is one I'd highly recommend. And then the last one, I don't actually have the physical book of it. I read it, well, I listened to the Audible version of it, and it was Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I don't really read or listen, I guess in this case, to too many books and autobiographies, really. I've gone through a handful over the years. Like Elon Musk's one was very good. There was a sort of, I think that's probably one of the last ones I've read. But this one is brilliant. Really, really enjoyed it. Not just because I've enjoyed watching a lot of films he's in, from like Interstellar to a few other classic ones. I do like Matthew McConaughey. Great voice, very calming. But honestly, just the lessons you can take from his life is one that not only I'm going to listen to again and get the physical book, and I guess for me there's a key takeaway was around, I guess, how he sort of had new film careers and opportunities come up to him, where he would maybe sleep on it for a couple of days before jumping in and saying, yes, that's something I want to do, and almost like sleeping on it, really saying if this is something that you need in your life. So I've started to try to reflect and take elements of that in my own life, where if I'm coming up to a decision or need to make a big life decision or choice, just to sleep on it and really think over time, is this something that really benefits me, or am I just doing it for a quick win, or just slowing down and taking the time to think about it. But there's so many like little snippets of information in there that I think are truly valuable. So whether you get the audible book, which is good because it's actually narrated by Matthew McConaughey himself, or if you get the physical book. But I know I'll be getting the physical book probably later this year and reading it probably next year, to be honest. But yeah, that's my top 9 books from 2022. Let me know if you've read any of them, or if you're planning to read any of them, or any books that you've enjoyed. My TBR for 2023 is absolutely massive, but it never hurts adding more books in. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.